Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be repotting these two larch trees. I think they're two larch, I don't know. It could be one tree, they could be joined at the root base. That's something we'll find out. I originally thought that maybe this larch would look good planted over this statue to recreate a Nick Lentz composition, and that might be a possibility. It'll depend on the root system of these trees, if I can wrap them around the statue, just like the larger Penelope style bonsai. This statue is a reproduction of a marble statue of Napoleon Bonaparte's sister, and it was very controversial when it came out, and well, you can probably see why. The statue was hidden away for many years, but now it's on public display. I'll show you some photographs of the Nick Lentz composition, this larch tree root over statue composition. It's quite a famous tree, maybe one of the most famous bonsai in the world. So let's have a look at it now. I found the 3D file online for free, so I got it 3D printed in PLA plastic, which isn't the most stable plastic in the world. It generally outdoors lasts maybe 4 or 5 years before it starts disintegrating. So my original intention was to recast this in cement, and I've just been trying to think how to do that, and I haven't come up with any solutions yet. I'm going to start the work now repotting these two larch trees, and I'll see if the smaller tree is suitable for this root over statue planting. If it's not, I'll have to find a younger larch tree and train the roots around the statue while the tree is young. These two larch trees were given to me by Zin from the YouTube channel Maybe Bonsai. He had to downsize his collection, so he gave me these two larch. So let's get them out of the pot and see what the root system is like, and see if it's one tree or two trees in this pot. And this is just a plastic pot. It's a good size, but I'll see if I can find something better. I'm repotting the trees now because the trees are becoming active, even though it's, middle to late winter. You can see the needles coming out from the buds on the tree. So it's a good time to repot them. And they'll be protected here in the greenhouse from frost and any severe cold weather. I'm going to begin by combing out the roots. And a lot of people will tell you, never bare root a coniferous tree. This is a deciduous coniferous tree, but I've had good luck bare rooting coniferous trees. I think it's actually better for them, because you can actually see the root structure. You're not just profile pruning the roots, which I don't agree with. I think profile pruning your roots is the same as just profile pruning the top of the tree. You're never really sorting out the structural issues. You're never improving the root system. You're just kind of trimming it and accepting what roots you have. And, if you want to create a really nice root system on a bonsai, you have to bare root them and do root work. So I'm not sure where these trees came from, where Zin got them from. It looks like they're in regular potting soil. I don't see any bonsai soil in here. So they may have been collected trees, or they may have been grown from seed. I have no idea. So I can see the roots aren't active on the larches yet. There's no white growing tips on the roots, which is good, which means it's a good time to repot them when the trees are becoming active and the roots aren't yet. So it's quite a dense, tightly packed root system. So I'm combing out, in a radial pattern. So I'm just ripping through all the crossing roots and keeping the nice radial roots intact. So I may be, combing out a lot of fine roots today. But again, the roots aren't active, so the tree should recover without any problems. I'm hoping it's 2 trees because I don't like, the Y-shaped composition that they're in at the present time. So if they're 2 trees, I can separate them and then, either replant them together or use the one for the root over statue composition. So these trees had a really miserable growing season last year. They leafed out early, I think in Zin's garage or outside, and then all that new growth got hit by the cold and died off, and the tree struggled all over the summer. A lot of the buds never came out on it. So it's back on track now. It had a nice cool winter. It's starting to leaf out, and these buds will develop very nicely, I think, because I'm protecting it here in the greenhouse. I think it's 2 trees because I can see this one's wiggling. It's kind of planted over the root base of this other tree, which is not looking very good. It's a bit of a one-sided root system, which leads me to believe these trees were probably collected as young seedlings. So it'll take me quite a while to comb this root system out because it's so tangled and there's so much of the old soil in here. But I'll just work away at it slowly and carefully, getting the 2 trees separated and get all this soil out and get the roots combed out. So a lot of these fine roots in here, you can see, the soil's full of fine roots that I'm combing out. And these roots are quite often dead. In cold winters, all the fine roots on these root systems will die off. And then in spring, the tree will generate new roots from the thicker ones that survived. And the tree creates its own soil. These fine roots die off, they decompose, and it creates its own kind of organic soil around the base of the tree. And that's how trees survive in pockets on rocks and that. They create their own soil that sustains the tree. It's called duff, this stuff. It's basically dead roots. So I'm not too worried about combing out all these fine roots because the tree will generate new ones in spring or in the greenhouse here over the winter. So we're kind of getting close to the middle of February, and winter here generally lasts till kind of the end of March. So we have another good month and a half of winter left. And we could get some very cold weather. So that's the reason, this tree will stay in the greenhouse. I'll keep it above freezing if possible, and it should do quite well. If it gets really cold out, what I do is I place, these newly repotted trees near the heater, which keeps them above freezing, even though, maybe most of the greenhouse will freeze over. But I keep the ones that are a little more tender and just repotted near the heater, and they don't freeze. Even if it drops down to like minus 20 Celsius or 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think I'm going to go underneath now on the root base and start combing out from the bottom. One thing that is nice, it's a very flat root base. So they could go in quite a shallow bonsai pot if I wanted to. There's one root of this tree kind of growing almost into the root system of the other tree. There we go. Bang. So there's the root system on this one. I'm not really sure if it's suitable for the root over statue, but maybe. I can always grow the roots out. So it's a bit of a one-sided root system on this tree. There was a thick root or two over here, but yeah. So I'll put that tree aside and I'll work on the larger tree here. Getting these roots combed out now. Okay, so there's the two trees kind of bare rooted. So I'll clean up and we'll come back and have a look at them. Here is a look at the root system on the two trees. So the large tree is very kind of one-sided. There's not much on this side of the tree, and there's a lot on this side. And a lot of them are really nice roots. Yeah, they're very interesting. The other tree has kind of more of a, again, it's one-sided. There's some good roots in there. Not what you would call a textbook radial root system or anything, but it has roots, that's for sure. After looking at the root system on these two trees, I don't think the smaller tree is suitable for planting as a root over statue composition. I would need longer roots that kind of go down into the soil, and these roots kind of spread out horizontally. So it's more suited for a shallow pot at the moment. I could take the smaller tree and plant it in a very tall pot and grow a root system that goes more vertical, and then use those roots to wrap around the statue. But I think, these two trees do look good together, so I'm going to plant them in a shallow pot at two tree composition. I think the root base is suited for that. I've picked out a pot for the composition. I chose this pot because it's quite long, so if I have the two trees in here, there's lots of room for them. If I was to plant a single tree in this pot, it's a fairly long pot. It's more Chinese proportions than the Japanese proportions for a pot. So I think it's a good pot. I think the color will be nice. It's kind of a reddish clay. It's got lots of patina. I think it'll go nice with the green foliage of the larch. It should look really, really good, actually. And it's one of my favorite pots. I got this at the Toronto Bonsai Society auction. I think it's a beautiful pot. I'm quite sure it's a Chinese pot, but I'm not sure. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments what that says on the side, and if it's Chinese, it sure looks like Chinese to me. Yeah, the other side of the pot has a bit of grasses kind of growing on it, so either side would look really good. I'm kind of leaning towards this side probably. Yeah, so I think that's the pot for this planting. So I'll try the trees out in the pot, and it'll take a bit of root pruning, but should look good. Now the other decision is if I put a rock in here or not, if I plant them kind of over top of a rock. So I'll play around with that also. I do have this rock that the tree would fit on it quite nicely, but I think there's so many roots that I don't think you'd see the rock much anyway. And rock plantings get very heavy. So I think it'll just be the trees in the pot. I think it'll look quite nice. So I'll have to arrange the trees in the pot and just come up with a composition. So I'll do that. That's kind of boring. They're too much in a line, too far apart from each other. Something like that is looking better. I think the wind-blown part of this tree needs to be like this. That's too far apart. Maybe the one kind of tucked in behind the other like this. That's looking better. Yeah, I think something like that. Some negative space on this side of the pot, the two trees on a similar angle on this side of the pot, kind of wind blown. Yeah, I think that's the composition I should go for. I'm putting my base layer of soil in the pot, Got drainage screens in there. It's all ready for planting. So next I've got to look at the trees and the root system on them to fit them together nicely. Here is a look at the root system. So the first root I notice is there's one kind of coming out here at a strange angle. I'm going to remove that. There's some large roots over here, and I think, you know, they have to be sort of feature surface roots. It'll have, you know, not a, as I said, a conventional radial root base. It'll be sort of a wild root system, but I still want to, you know, make it look nice. There's a root here that's sticking up out of the root base, so I'm going to prune that away. I don't think there's any roots attached to it that I can prune back to. Maybe there is. I'll prune it off short and we'll see what happens. There's a root here going a funny direction. I'll get rid of that. Now out at the end here, there's a thick root, and you can see this one, it kind of curls around, and there's another root going over it. I think, you know, it's just too wild looking, so I'm going to prune it off short to there and get rid of that. And that one that wraps over, I'll prune that off short also. Getting rid of that part of the root system. It looks like that one that wrapped over it came from down below actually. So I'll prune the curly part off like that. I still want a root system that flows down into the soil. So here's one that sticks straight up. I'll get rid of that. There's another root here coming off of this root. This is radial, and then it goes 90 degrees. It's not very attractive. I'm going to prune it off. And there's another part of it that curls around here. I'm also going to prune that off short. And I don't know if this part of the root system will live because I've done some severe root pruning on it, but it might generate new roots. I think there's a good chance it will. We'll find out in the future. Some of these roots are a little long. This one sticks up, so I'll get rid of that. This one's sticking straight up. We'll get rid of that one. That's too long. That's too long. Let's do a general profile prune here. There's a root here. Again, it takes a funny turn. I'm going to prune it off shorter. Like that. Prune this one off shorter. There's not much around the back. There is one that grows underneath. I'm going to get rid of that one. Just prune off some of these ones on the bottom that are going funny directions. Prune back some of these long ones. This one's sticking up. Get rid of that. Get rid of a few of these roots sticking up, and the rest isn't too bad. I'll just flatten out the root ball on the bottom, taking some of those roots off that are kind of crossing underneath the tree. Keeping everything fairly radial if possible. Yeah, so I think that's pretty good. It seems to fit in the pot quite nicely. So I think that's it for the root pruning on the main tree. Some severe root pruning in this area, some light pruning around, and some cleanup. But I think, you know, it's in fairly good shape. So that tree can get planted in the pot right about here. So I'll just put that there for now. Stay. And I'll work on the other smaller tree now. So here's the root system on it. So it has a root here that's dead. Take that off. At least the top of it was dead. There's a root that goes underneath this one and does something funny. I'm taking that off. Like that. This one kind of sticks up. I'll prune it back. This one sticks up. A bit of moss here. I'll just try and remove. Underneath I have one going straight down. I'll take off. This one crosses underneath. Prune this one back. Bit of profile pruning. That other tree just tipped over. And I think that's in pretty good shape. And again, you know, it's not a perfect radial root base or anything, but I think both root systems kind of look the same. They're kind of wild and twisty, and I think that's just going to be the nature of these trees. Kind of wild, twisty root systems. So that tree is pruned up also, so now it's time to plant the trees. And once the trees are planted, I'll prune the branches. Now that I can see all the buds that are alive, I can prune them back and make the two trees kind of fit together. Alright, so here I go, planting the composition. Now there's no reason I have to have the trees on a slant. I'm looking at the branch structure and they're fairly horizontal, so I don't think I want to tilt the tree too much. I think somewhere about here is good, and the other tree will go in behind. Something like, I think I was going to have it more this direction, the root system. And I don't want the trees too far apart, otherwise they don't look like they're together, they look like two separate trees in a big pot. So I think something like that looks pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so I'll make sure my roots are combed out. That's looking good. And I can start adding some bonsai soil. Hopefully they stay there. And I might have to adjust the height slightly on them. So I will start filling it in with soil. Like that. Tamp my soil down. And then I've got to see the height of the trees. I want some of those roots exposed because they're quite nice. They're interesting. So the soil is almost to the right level in the pot. It's a little low, but so could I raise this up a bit? I think I could. So I'll just lift it up and work the soil into the roots. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good height in the pot. Now the other one, I think it's also quite good. I'll just raise it slightly. Okay. Now, before I get too far, let's stand back and look at the composition. Just see if everything's looking good before I, do the final topping up of the soil and the watering. The trees need trimming, but I think the composition is good. I like the space over in this side of the pot. The trees don't look too jammed against this end of the pot. They look nicely balanced. So I think all is good. I'll finish up topping up the soil, get the trees watered. And it never hurts to put a little too much soil on, and you can always rake it away once the trees are established and growing. Okay, so that's looking good. I can give the planting a watering now. So here I go with the water. Okay, that's good. I'll spin the trees around so you can see what they look like from all angles. So here is the front. Coming around to the right hand side. The back. The left hand side. And back to the front. I'm quite happy with the composition of these 2 larch trees. So the next step is pruning them up, and I'll do that in part 2. So that is it for part 1 of this series. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.